Hi writers, I'm Lauren Sapala. Today I'm talking about one simple tip that you can use to conquer your inner critic. Now, this is such a simple thing, but I do want to warn you that it's hard to do. It's hard to put into practice. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. So the thing is, when most writers write, writing itself can be kind of hard and tedious. When we're writing the scene or writing the chapter, whatever it is we're writing, we need to sort of push ourselves to get through it. It feels like a bit of a task. It's almost like exercising. Like nobody wants to get off the couch and go jogging, but people force themselves to get off the couch and go jogging. So when you're done writing, when you finished writing the scene or you finished writing the section or whatever it is that you were writing, it can feel like an accomplishment, as it should. You should pat yourself on the back and really tell yourself, hey, I did good work. I accomplished this thing. What happens though is that usually, because it feels like such an accomplishment, the writer will go back and they will reread what they just wrote. And most writers actually like to reread their work. Even if we have a pretty severe inner critic or a pretty severe negative inner voice that's telling us it's not very good, there is still this feeling of like, well, maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe there will be a gem in there. And all of us usually get, one or two good sentences at least that we really like, even if we have a very severe inner critic. So that's what draws us to do it. We feel accomplished. We feel proud that we finished. We want to reread it. And we also want to check it out and see if it's any good, right? That's what goes through the writer's mind. I need to see if it's any good, which sounds logical, but really isn't, because we're not in a place to do that. But when we go back and we start rereading it right after we finish something, what happens is that we move out of the creative space, that space where we were sort of just letting the ideas come in, letting the ideas flow, seeing how things unfold, following the energy, that nice intuitive space. We move out of that and we move over into more of the left brain space, where now we're judging, now we're analyzing, now we're evaluating. And with all of that comes criticizing. Now we're looking at it from a rational viewpoint. Is this good? If I was someone else reading this, would I like it? Would I think it was good? Should I have used that word there? Oh, look, I used that word 6 times. I always use that word too much. It's a very slippery slope. And before you know it, you're slipping down that slope fast. And you're berating yourself. You're criticizing yourself. You're tearing your work to pieces. Now, some writers, even though it's unfortunate that we've even gotten to this point, can go even further down the slippery slope and really listen to that inner critic. When the inner critic is rereading and saying, oh, you used that word 6 times. I can't believe you did that. That's so stupid. Then we take it one step further and we decide to listen to the inner critic and we're like, okay, I'll just edit it right here. Let me take out the 5 instances of the 6 times I use that word. Let me change this sentence around with this sentence. I'm going to strike out this paragraph, and we start editing. And we usually start editing pretty aggressively because we're not editing from a neutral place. We're not editing from a place where we've had time to sit and think about what we wrote and think about if we really made our intention clear, if what we were trying to say is coming through. All of that kind of gets lost because the truth is we're in an emotional spin. The negative voice came in of the inner critic and told us we're bad, we're not good enough, our writing sucks, our writing is stupid. All of these things, these negative critical thought patterns, and we went into a spin. So now we feel shame. Now we feel not good about ourselves. We feel like we're not good enough. We feel like people are going to laugh at us. The love is going to be withdrawn, right? Like we're triggered on all of these different emotional levels. And so when we go back in and we start editing, we're really doing it from a frantic, desperate place of fear. This is not a good energy to bring to the editing process. Also, much of the time, whatever you just wrote is part of a larger piece. It's part of a larger work. So you might have just written one chapter or half of a scene or one opening section to a chapter. And all of a sudden you're trying to edit it when you don't have the rest of the story in place. You haven't let the rest of it unfold naturally. So you don't even know what the big picture is. You don't even really know how this one little piece that you're working with right now is going to fit into the whole. And if you don't have that information, if you don't have that big picture view yet, you simply cannot do good editing. So this is really a recipe for disaster. If you have a strong inner critic, if you don't have that much experience writing, or this is your first novel, and you don't really have that much experience with your own creative cycles and your own creative process, rereading and going right into editing the second you finish writing something, it's a really bad idea. And guaranteed, it will bring that inner critic in every single time. So that is the simple trick, to not reread after you have finished writing something. Now, at the beginning of this video, I said this is a really simple tip, but it can be really hard to put into practice. And the reason it can be so hard to put into practice is because a lot of times when we don't reread, we feel either like we're missing out on something, like, oh, I'm missing out on the chance to read the thing I just wrote and really bask in that sense of accomplishment, even if it's going to turn into pain, because it usually does, because the inner critic comes in. Or I feel like I should be reading right now. I should be rereading because that's how writers improve. How am I ever going to improve if I don't reread what I just wrote and I don't pick out all the flaws and I don't look for the ways that I can improve? Then I'm never going to get any better. So that's a valid concern. If you never reread any of your writing, if I was saying put it in a drawer and don't come back to it for 25 to 30 years, then yes, that would be a valid concern. That's not what I'm saying. You will come back to it when the time is right. There is a time and a place for editing, and you are going to wait until you are at that time and place to edit your work. That time and place is almost always after you have an entire sloppy first draft done. So that might mean if you're writing a blog post, the entire sloppy first draft is 1 page. It's about 800 words. If it's a novel, that might be 80,000 words. It might be 250 to 300 pages, and it takes you a year or 2 years or 3 years to write. Now, at this point, I always get the writers to say, wait a minute, if I'm writing a novel and it's going to take me 3 years to write this thing, I'm not supposed to reread anything the entire way through. I'm just supposed to write these sections and put them away and not revisit them until 3 years later. So the short answer is basically yes, and that's actually what I do with my fiction manuscripts. The longer answer is, if there is a plot point that you need to know, that you've legitimately forgotten, or you haven't picked it up in a while, you don't remember where you were at, there's some sort of valid need for information where you need to go back into the story and you need to figure out what's already been written or where you left something or some sort of character detail. Yes, you can go back. You can quickly go back and check for that information. That's totally fine. I'm not suggesting that you have these long gaps away from your work so that you don't remember anything you wrote and you're totally confused. However, when you go back into the manuscript, really quickly check. If you're reading for over 2 minutes, if you're searching for something over 5 to 10 minutes, chances are you've gotten sucked in. And at first it feels good. You're reading stuff, you're like, oh, this isn't that bad. Oh, I'm pleasantly surprised. And then before you know it, that inner critic comes in and says, yeah, but that word choice is really awkward. And this doesn't even seem like a chapter transition. I don't even know if this is a chapter. And it's so insidious and it happens so quickly. It's really hard to keep your bearings. So keep your boundaries in place around that. Keep an eye on the time. How long have I been reading? How long have I been searching for this detail that I need before I can move on and write the next scene? Really be aware of that. Yes, you're allowed to go back and check. Yes, you're allowed to go back and get information. What we're trying to do, we're not trying to cut you off from that. What we're trying to do is prevent any openings for that left brain energy to come in, for that inner critic to come in and start picking things apart. Because once you have that voice in your head that's picking things apart, you are going to lose a lot of your inspiration for writing that first draft. You're going to lose a lot of that juice that's kept you going of like, I love the story, I love the characters, I'm really excited about this idea, I feel really close to the characters, I feel like I'm almost falling in love, I wake up every day and I look forward to working on this story, or I know this week I'm going to get some time this weekend to work on my story and that feels really good. The more you bring in that judging critical energy, the more you're going to lose that feeling. And that feeling is your battery power. That feeling is the power that's going to take you through sometimes that long journey of finishing the first draft of your manuscript. So please keep that in mind. And like I said, you will bring that power in later. You'll bring that critical energy in later. When you're done with the entire sloppy first draft, then it's going to be time to edit. And after you've taken a little bit of time away from the manuscript to get perspective, that's when you're going to go back in and read it with a critical eye. That's when you're going to say, okay, I really went on and on here and that passage needs to be cut. Or, okay, this character is just kind of a sketch and I really need to flesh them out much more. I can see that now. Or, oh, I didn't really make it clear how these two plot points come together. But you're not going to have the perspective to see those things or address those things if you're still in the middle of writing the story. If you've just come fresh from a writing session, the words just came out of you, you're not going to have that perspective to see or address those things. So everything in its right time and place. The writing process, it will unfold in a way that works, and everything will come together. If we can keep writing in its place, editing in its place, and everything in the right time and place, the whole thing is going to flow a lot easier. As always, if you have questions or you have comments, I would love to hear about them. Please drop a comment in the comments box below. If you have a tip for how you prevent the inner critic from coming in and picking apart your manuscript, I would love to hear it. If you have any strategies with how you've dealt with the negative critical voices in your head as a writer or as a person, drop that in the comments box below as well. The people who are watching this video are looking for information on that topic, and whatever you have to say could be really helpful as well. And if this is really resonating with you, if you're a writer who struggles with severe inner critic, procrastination, perfectionism, low self-esteem, big self-doubt, please subscribe to my channel. These are the kinds of topics I talk about every week. There's a lot of writers out there who maybe have all the confidence in the world and know exactly what they're doing. I am not that writer, and the people I coach are not that writers, and the people I teach in my classes are not that writers, and are not those writers, and that's okay. This is a place for the writer who is very unsure of themselves and feeling very lost and confused and maybe big time anxiety about writing. So this is the place for you. Please subscribe to my channel, and please subscribe to my newsletter. I send out all sorts of stuff on classes and courses and different free offerings and affordable offerings that can be really helpful to anyone who is intuitive or creative. Until next time, I hope you guys keep that inner critic at bay. Thanks, everyone.